Welcome to Meadowbank. Meadowbank is a suburb located 15 kilometres northwest of Sydney. At first glance, it's just a random station on the T9. However, walk around this suburb and you'll realise that this is an underrated urbanist heaven.
New urbanism, which nowadays people tend to conflate with urbanism, is essentially a movement that promotes walkable neighbourhoods and human-scale developments. It sits in direct opposition to suburban sprawl, that is, detached houses and car-dependent infrastructure, which I've already spoken about at length on this channel.
Urbanism is essentially founded around 6 key ideals: density, mobility, services, walkability, amenity, and community. Let's use Meadowbank to explore each of these principles. I've been reading Americans Against the City, Anti-Urbanism in the 20th Century by Stephen Kahn. Density enables, often forces, diverse and heterogeneous populations of people to interact with each other, creating the cosmopolitanism that is the hallmark of great cities that has so excited some and terrified others. People are what make places appealing, giving them life and creating the demand that justifies services like shops and parks. The west side of Meadowbank Station has older red brick apartments. The east side, where I am right now, used to be a primarily industrial suburb before undergoing what is known as urban consolidation over the past 2 decades. Don't pretend your geography teachers aren't watching, I know you are. To support this huge amount of density, good public transport is an unquestionable necessity. Meadowbank Station runs trains roughly every 7.5 minutes in peak hour and every 15 minutes the rest of the day. On top of that, there's a ferry stop with ferries to Parramatta and Circular Quay every 20 minutes. There's also buses to Ryde, Macquarie University and Gladesville. The density of Meadowbank supports its numerous services. There's a super IGA near the station, as well as a medical centre, Asian grocer and more. All over the suburb, there's also restaurants and cafes. While Meadowbank does have a lot going on here, it isn't exactly bursting at the seams with services, so it's a good thing that Road Central is just a 20-minute walk away over the beautiful Parramatta River. Or you could just take the train. Speaking of which, good walkability is essential to ensuring these places revolve around people, not cars, the way that most older parts of Sydney do. On top of the bridge to roads, the suburb has wide footpaths, raised pedestrian crossings, and 1-lane roads. Combined, these all make sure cars don't go faster than 50 kilometres an hour. That is, what few cars are driving in this highly connected neighbourhood. Consequently, pedestrians feel safe, encouraging them to take advantage of this amenable, convenient area. Of course, the west side of Meadowbank is home to this egregious sign, which goes against literally everything urbanism stands for, but everything else here is pretty great. Meadowbank is a highly amenable area. It sits right by the Parramatta River with a healthy amount of tree cover, particularly around the older red bricks. Give the trees on the east side some time to mature. Density and tree cover are far from antithetical, and even if they were, we all know one apartment block destroys far less trees than an equivalent number of houses. Furthermore, Meadowbank has a beautiful waterside park and a huge sports ground. These open spaces are essential for dense communities. In order to foster community, our physical environment needs to be built to foster community. In Meadowbank, there's always people about. There's little sense of isolation. The shops, cafes and parks all tie together to create a strong sense of community. You feel like you're part of something in places like this.
Just quickly, shout out to my monthly Ko-fi supporters. Please support me if you can. And also a huge thank you to Matthew from Ahead Matthew Awesome, who helped me with a lot of the filming. Be sure to subscribe to Matthew in the top right. Later in this video, Matthew and I sat down to talk about Turramurra. You can watch the full exclusive 20-minute cut if you support me on Ko-fi. Dedicated to easing the housing crisis, Chris Minns has vowed to build up, not out, with plans to densify stations all over Sydney. And in response, plenty have come out of the woodworks over the past year with some truly odd takes. Rose Hill will become a ghetto. This will bring the end to the family home. It's the end of the backyard. They're gonna turn Western Sydney into Kolkata. overpopulated, no transport links.
Hampstead will be a concrete metropolis.
This is a form of ethnic cleansing unseen in the history of the modern world. All of these takes can be explained by anti-urbanism, the topic of today's video. Suburbanization over the past 70 years was largely caused by an exponential rise in car dependency. I've already covered that in depth on this channel, but if you ask me, that was a catalyst, not a cause. There is something intrinsic, particularly in the Anglosphere, that sees beauty in cities that aren't really cities. Let's rewind to a century ago. Back then, cities were places filled with factories, industry, ports, and smog. In Sydney, poorer workers lived in areas like Surrey Hills, Redfern, Balmain, and Piermont, all of which used to be home to dense slums, overcrowded, unsanitary, and crime-ridden. Unsurprisingly, people did not like this. T.S. Eliot, a poet from the 1900s, was perhaps one of the most outspoken critics of urban life. I studied his poems in year 12 and I thought I'd never have to again. But here we are, the things I do for you guys. In his poem Preludes, Eliot laments that tired workers must suffer the burnt out ends of smoky days. He uses synecdoche in the muddy feet that press to early coffee stands, condemning the repetitive lifestyle of the industrial class. Finally, he ends with the notion that worlds revolve like ancient women gathering fuel in vacant lots. The point being that we in the modern world are paradoxically gaining sustenance from an empty space. T.S. Eliot had every right to assert his discontent. The loss of individuality, the fear of alienation that characterizes his poems could be seen all over cities back then. Americans looked at the dizzying growth of industrial cities and saw loss. The loss of intimate social relations replaced by anonymity, and of nurturing communities replaced by alienation. They were convinced that community could not be achieved in the modern city. They desired a place where everyone knows your name and cares about your well-being. Anti-urbanism seeks to be everything that urbanism isn't. Where urbanism concentrates people, anti-urbanism detethers us from the collective, decentralizing our cities, turning them into a collection of small towns. If we want to know everyone's name, surely that means we need as few people in these places as possible.
We're going to go up the T9 a little, back to a station I've actually visited on this channel before, Cheltenham. This suburb is the physical manifestation of anti-urbanism. Well, this one is easy. Cheltenham has no housing diversity, with 0% apartments and 0% townhouses. The suburb only has a population of 2,243. There's just not that many people in Cheltenham.
Unsurprisingly, with too few people to support services, Cheltenham has none. No, seriously, no shops, no restaurants, just Cheltenham Girls High School. This is because back when the suburb was subdivided in 1886, the landowner specifically made sure no commercial developments could be built, a requirement that has persisted to this day.
The fact that Cheltenham has so few people is at odds with its train station that receives a train every 15 minutes all day. Unfortunately, Cheltenham has nothing else in the way of public transport. Okay, I have to confess, Cheltenham has abundant amenity. It's a gorgeous suburb with generous tree cover. However, believe it or not, Cheltenham doesn't have any public open spaces. All it has is Cheltenham Recreation Club, which you have to pay to enter. Technically, Cheltenham is very walkable, because there's no one here. The last time I was here, I stood in the middle of that road, right next to the station, for like 30 seconds before a car came. To be fair, they have built a shared path from nearby Beecroft to Cheltenham, but again, there's not very many people here to enjoy it. Look, I don't want to be too harsh on Cheltenham. I have no doubt it's genuinely a pleasant place to live, but it simply mirrors so much of anti-urbanism. It appeals to Australians because it's in this city, but it's not this city. As nearby Epping and Beecroft change with the times, Cheltenham stays frozen, an urban village. And that was fine for decades gone by, but Cheltenham's median house price is now $3,010,000. And that brings me to the final tenet, community. Those who offered community as the alternative to the impersonality of the city seldom acknowledged that any community is necessarily defined by those whom it includes, and thus also by those whom it does not. Suburbs like Cheltenham love to proclaim their strong sense of community. And I have no doubt that this suburb has that, for those lucky enough to afford it. The suburb is so prohibitively expensive that its population actually went down from 2016 to 2021, with its median age going up 3 years to 46.
The way I see it, anti-urbanism was so desperate in the past half century to avoid individuals being overcome by the collective that we overcompensated. Richard Sexton put it perfectly. Residents of suburbia try to own individually what a community once provided for all. They don't share, but hoard, as each home site seeks to be a self-sufficient entity. Our desire to be individuals has ironically led us into a different collective, a spatially isolated one. Yet these ingrained fears of cities have pervaded for so many decades that many cannot see their positives. Garrard insists Rosehill will be a ghetto, staunchly holding a widely held yet antiquated belief that apartment developments are dirty, overcrowded areas. Carboni has had car dependency drilled into him, jumping straight to congestion as many NIMBYs do, not considering that new residents in transit-oriented development will primarily use public transport. There's also, once again, that desire for each Australian to have a self-sufficient home, one where they need not share their open spaces. Koori is just being racist, plain and simple. There's a very poorly hidden implication that older European migrants will be displaced by newer Asian migrants. I don't know if she's walked around Campsie lately. It's already quite Asian, and I don't see how that's a problem. People like Koori have found their community, and they say that they want to save it. But in reality, they fulfill Con's prophecy. Their sense of community solely depends on the exclusion of others. Decades-old anti-urbanist ideals mean that we're mostly blind to our biases and privilege. So the thought of having suburbs that we feel entitled to live in disrupted by Chris Minns' plans is terrifying, even though the benefits of urbanist communities are well documented, even though it's well proven that this will help ease the housing crisis. To put it simply, when you are accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression.
To finish the video, I've journeyed to Turramurra, on Sydney's Upper North Shore, a suburb that sits smack bang between Cheltenham and Meadowbank on the urbanism scale. I've met up with Matthew from the YouTube channel Ahead Matthew Awesome, who lives in the suburb.
In all of Sydney, it's honestly one of the best places to live. I can't think of anywhere better to live.
First, the negatives. Turramurra is without a doubt a highly low-density suburb, with 68.1% of dwellings being houses. However, crucially, this number has gone down by nearly 15% in 10 years. Importantly, this was not at the expense of houses, with only 66 less houses than 2011. That is to say, you can retrofit new dwellings into a suburb, allowing people to live closer to existing amenities without ruining its existing character.
It's turned out to, bring a lot more life into Turramurra, but we still have, a lot more to go. We get, a lot of public transport here with the train line. The train line is one of the main reasons why I love, public transport, living next to a train line. So the buses around here, they're okay, but the main issue, they don't operate frequently enough. Like on Sundays, it's very common for buses to, only run every 2 hours.
bringing more people to Turramurra, do you think that would help?
Yeah, bringing some more people into Turramurra would help out with that. And then also, having the routes being, more convenient to other places that people in Turramurra go to.
The amenity of Turramurra is quite excellent. As you can see, there's generous tree cover, but unlike Cheltenham, there's quite a few parks, including one close to the station and two about 1 kilometre away.
Having all this development near nature and everything, it's a very peaceful, very welcoming place here. If you get good people building it, you can get some amazing developments and enhance the community, enhance the tree cover, enhance the character of the community.
Turramurra might be walkable on the north side of the Pacific Highway, but then there's the Pacific Highway itself, an awful, imposing strode that no one would really want to walk on.
South of the highway, you need to, cross the Pacific Highway. There's very minimal places to cross the highway. Yet during the peak hour, when we get trains every 3 minutes, the trains come way more frequently than you can actually cross the road, which is ridiculous.
It's highways like these that hold back much of Sydney, and sadly it's also often highways like these where apartments get built in a desperation to preserve the existing character of the suburb, or more accurately, attempt to exclude new residents as best as possible. Fortunately, Turramurra has not done this, not yet at least, with its apartments set quite far back from the highway. For that, I applaud the suburb. Services are where Turramurra kind of begins to slip a little. There are shops near the station, but then there's Turramurra Village, empty and abandoned.
Oh yes, that place. There's only like 1 or 2 shops there that actually get any tenants in there, and often they're only there for like 6 to 12 months. A lot of the shops like right next to the highway, it's noisy, it's very polluted along there. A lot of shops don't want to move next to the highway. A lot of people don't want to walk next to the highway. There's a lot of people that live in Turramurra, but nobody ever stays here. After about half an hour, everyone goes, oh, screw this, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna go somewhere else. Finally getting that Turramurra community hub built, I think would, which would improve things quite significantly.
So, the tenet that ties this all together. Does Turramurra have a good sense of community?
It's because this is one of the best places to live. I certainly want to be able to share this community with other people. Basically what's happening at the moment, it's growing very stagnant. It's sort of, there hasn't been a lot of investment in Turramurra. Slowly, sort of bringing up the density a little bit.
Anti-urbanists either haven't bothered to check what cities are like now, or just feel comfortable enough in their own isolation. Cities are no longer the alienating slums Eliot condemned them for being. They're beautiful places with amenity, community spaces, and people from all walks of life. Old habits die hard, and it'll probably take a generation for us to undeniably embrace urbanism. We should live in places defined by their openness to new residents, young and old, well off or not, of all backgrounds, abilities, and beliefs. The hallmark of great cities isn't to create community through exclusion, but to bring diverse people together. Density shouldn't just be seen as inevitable. We should be truly excited for it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.